All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to discover how everyday individuals who decided to speak up didn't just ruffle a few feathers, they actually reshaped global laws. And more importantly, we'll look at how you can use today's legal frameworks to do the exact same thing, safely. We hear the term whistleblower all the time in the news, right? But the true mechanics of how it all works, the sheer impact these people have, and the legal shields available to them, well, they're often totally misunderstood. So we're going to break down the sources and show you exactly how the system operates. We have a seriously fascinating roadmap ahead. We'll be covering the impact of speaking up, global whistleblower ripple effects, how anonymous reporting works, financial fraud and rewards, and finally, safeguarding the whistleblower. Starting with Section 1, the impact of speaking up, and how massive corporate scandals literally forced systemic legal changes. To really grasp the power of a whistleblower, we have to rewind back to the early 2000s. The scandals from giants like Enron and WorldCom weren't just little blips on the radar. They were massive systemic failures. Take WorldCom, for example. False accounting entries started popping up there in 1999. But fast forward to 2002, an internal auditor, Cynthia Cooper, on her team stumbled upon a scheme that inflated assets by, get this, $11 billion in hidden costs. Her decision to speak up led directly to the enactment of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act just months later in July 2002. And this act was a massive deal. It didn't just punish financial misconduct, it explicitly created protections for whistleblowers in public companies, cleared up timeframes for complaints, and strictly prohibited employer retaliation. And this power to force reform isn't just limited to finance. Back in 1996, Dr. Jeffrey Wigand, who was a VP of Research and Development, publicly revealed that Big Tobacco was actually willingly altering cigarette components just to boost the addictive effect of nicotine. Now, it took years of legal battles, but this single truth-teller completely revolutionized the system. It ultimately led to the 2009 Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, which granted the FDA regulatory control to mandate warning labels and ban flavored cigarettes. Moving right along to Section 2, global whistleblower ripple effects, because this extends way, way beyond American finance. Whistleblowing actively reshapes global privacy. Take this number, for instance, 87 million. That is the number of Facebook profiles that were harvested by the British political consulting firm Cambridge Analytica. Data consultant Christopher Wiley blew the whistle on this back in 2018. Exposing how all this data was misused to build psychological profiles and target political advertisements. This impacted massive geopolitical events like Brexit and the election of Donald Trump. And the fallout? This scandal directly influenced the European Union's rollout of the Digital Services Act in 2022 to create a safer digital space and regulate social media targeting. Now contrast that with another mind-blowing number, 4,900. Bradley Birkenfeld, an American working as a private banker at UBS in Switzerland, disclosed details about tax evasion to the U.S. Department of Justice. His disclosures basically forced the Swiss government to reveal the identities of at least 4,900 account holders. This one singular act effectively triggered the end of legendary Swiss banking secrecy. It's just incredible. And here is the wild part. Modern laws don't just protect you for exposing these massive global frauds, they actually pay you. Today, whistleblowers can be rewarded with up to 30% of recovered funds. We're going to break down the exact mechanics of that financial reward shortly, but definitely keep that massive 30% figure in the back of your mind. So, a lone truth-teller can create a legislative shockwave literally anywhere in the world. It turns out, whether a corporation is poisoning the air or releasing dangerous drugs, a single voice can halt the absurdity. Over in Germany, an engineer named Karsten von Bruch reported that Volkswagen had fraudulently modified software to pass emissions tests. That resulted in the infamous Dieselgate scandal, which essentially forced the EU to implement independent vehicle testing. Meanwhile, in France, Dr. Irene Frachon investigated a diabetes drug called Mediator that triggered heart failure, and her work ultimately led to strict conflict of interest laws between decision-makers and the pharmaceutical industry. This idea of speaking up, it is now essentially recognized as a fundamental human right. Take a listen to what the European Court of Human Rights declared following the LuxLeaks scandal, where two auditors exposed massive corporate tax evasion in Luxembourg. They stated, recognition of whistleblower status must apply in principle to all offenses, failing which the protection would be voided of its substance. After years of being prosecuted themselves for theft and breach of confidentiality, those two auditors were actually acquitted. This ruling absolutely cements that exposing corporate wrongdoing is heavily protected on a continental scale. All right, let's jump into Section 3, how anonymous reporting works, and the actual mechanics of protecting your identity. So, if you witness a violation today, how do you report it without completely ruining your own life? It is quite literally the single most important question for any prospective truth teller. You want to stop the fraud, of course, but you don't want to lose your career or face retaliation. Well, the good news is, thanks to legislation like the Dodd-Frank Act, there is a very specific mechanism to report financial fraud completely anonymously. Here is exactly how that works under the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. Step 1, you hire a specialized attorney. By leveraging a lawyer, you can submit your tips to these agencies while keeping your identity completely out of the government's initial records. It's essentially a legal ghost protocol. Step 2 involves submitting what's called a Form TCR, which stands for tip, complaint, or referral. And then Step 3, your attorney acts as your intermediary. They handle all the communications, ensuring your name stays totally off the radar while the investigation gets rolling. However, you've really got to understand that not every program functions exactly like the SEC. If you are reporting workplace safety issues to OSHA or anti-money laundering violations to FinCEN, you can actually report directly and anonymously right from the start without even needing an attorney. But if you are dealing with tax fraud, direct anonymous reporting is not allowed. The IRS requires your identity upfront on Form 211 under penalty of perjury. Similarly, the False Claims Act requires your identity initially. Now, while these agencies do keep your identity highly confidential, you cannot be a total ghost to the government in these specific instances. Which brings us to Section 4, financial fraud and rewards. Let's break down these legal frameworks. Let's talk about those massive financial incentives I mentioned earlier. For the SEC, the CFTC, and FinCEN, if your information leads to enforcement actions recovering over $1 million, you are legally entitled to anywhere from 10 to 30% of those funds. For FinCEN specifically, it's up to 30%. And for the IRS, the threshold jumps to over $2 million, but the reward is a staggering 15% to 30%. The whole system is explicitly designed to heavily incentivize those who are willing to risk their comfort to expose major financial crimes. And finally, Section 5, safeguarding the whistleblower and the specific protections against employer retaliation. Because let's face it, financial rewards mean absolutely nothing if you lose your livelihood or face severe harassment in the meantime. That's exactly where tools like the qui tam provision under the False Claims Act come in. A qui tam action allows an individual to tackle massive schemes, like healthcare or defense contractor fraud, by actually suing on behalf of the government. And what is so fascinating here is that these lawsuits are initially filed under seal. This means they are kept strictly confidential from the defendant and the public while the government investigates. This gives the whistleblower an incredibly powerful temporary shield of anonymity and protection while the case builds. The big overarching theme of all these laws is structural protection. Whether you are flagging a hazardous work environment to OSHA or exposing a billion-dollar banking fraud under Dodd-Frank, federal laws explicitly prohibit your employer from retaliating against you. If they even try to fire you, demote you, or harass you for stepping up, these regulatory bodies have robust mechanisms in place to penalize the employer and protect your career. So we've seen the history, right? We've seen the evidence. Knowing that past whistleblowers like Cynthia Cooper and Christopher Wiley have literally changed the course of global history, and knowing that modern laws now financially empower you and legally protect you to do the exact same thing safely, we really have to ask, if you witness the next massive corporate fraud, what will your legacy be? Will you have the courage to blow the whistle? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.